I caught my son's wife on my security cameras quietly plotting to move her parents into my house while I was on vacation in Hawaii. Once everything I said inside, she won't make a scene. She's old. She'll just accept it. My daughter-in-law laughed to her mom. They thought I was too weak to fight back. So I set a trap that left them stunned, exposed, and can you imagine being thousands of miles away watching a beautiful sunset, completely at peace? Only for your phone to buzz, and what you see on your security camera shatters your entire world. It wasn't a stranger breaking into my home. Oh no, it was my own daughter-in-law, her parents, and even my son, orchestrating a complete, calculated invasion. And when I saw them strolling through my house, like it was a showroom they'd already purchased, my heart didn't race. It went completely, utterly still. I was sitting on a balcony in Honolulu, the sun melting into the Pacific, when my phone vibrated next to my iced tea. Motion detected. Front hallway. I thought, okay, maybe it's the cat sitter or a package delivery. I pulled up the camera feed, barely glancing at the screen, until I saw them. 3 people standing in my foyer. Not strangers. My daughter-in-law, Rachel. Her mother. Her father. None of them lived there. None of them had permission to enter. Yet there they were. There was a man with a clipboard near the staircase. Definitely a mover. Professional hired? Rachel's mother asked. Rachel actually laughed. Oh yes, once everything is inside, Mary won't make a scene. She's old. She'll just accept it. My heart didn't stop, it didn't race. It just froze. Completely. I turned up the volume on my phone with trembling fingers, needing to hear every damning word. Rachel continued. We'll get everything moved before she comes back. By the time she lands Tuesday, it'll be done. She won't throw out my parents once they're settled in. She hates conflict. Her mother nodded, scanning my living room, the living room my late husband and I built together in our retirement years. She was clearly evaluating where her recliner would go. Let me tell you, when I saw them plotting to take over my entire house, I didn't drop my phone. I didn't gasp. I froze, yes, but not from fear. It was from clarity. Suddenly, all those little things I'd brushed off over the last 2 years rearranged themselves in my mind like puzzle pieces finally clicking into place. Rachel suggesting I should downsize. Her casual comments about how big homes are wasted on elderly people. Her lingering glances at furniture that wasn't hers. The way she'd walk through my rooms, touching things, measuring them with her eyes. They had been planning this whole time. And now, with me thousands of miles away, they were ready to push the final domino. I ended the feed. Then I reopened it. Anger had sharpened my vision now. I needed to see everything. They weren't watering my plants. They weren't checking the mail. They weren't doing anything remotely defensible. They were measuring my living room wall. Rachel's father held a tape measure against the decorative molding my husband had installed himself 20 years ago. We can put our cabinet here, he said, nodding toward the space where my bookshelf stood. My bookshelf, filled with novels I'd collected over decades. The mover scribbled notes. Rachel pointed toward the hallway. My parents will take the master bedroom upstairs. Mary can stay in the smaller guest room downstairs. She doesn't need all that space anymore. I slowly lowered the phone onto the balcony table. My vacation wasn't over, but something inside me was. Something had cracked open, and I couldn't close it again, even if I wanted to. For the first time, I admitted something I'd been avoiding for years. They didn't see me as family. They saw me as real estate. My home wasn't a place they visited out of love. It was a property they were circling, waiting for the right moment to claim. And that moment in their minds was now. While I was gone. While I was defenseless. While I was supposed to be relaxing on a beautiful island, trusting that the people I loved most in the world respected the boundaries of my life. I wasn't going to call the police. Not yet. That would end the invasion, yes, but it wouldn't end the pattern. The real enemy wasn't just trespassing. It was entitlement. Entitlement that had been cultivated for years, nurtured by my son and his wife, fed by my inability to say no when they asked for help. Temporary fixes don't solve long-term rot. And this was rot. Deep, festering rot that had spread through the very foundation of my relationship with my own child. No, I didn't want them arrested and released with a warning. I wanted them to show their true intentions fully, without me lifting a finger. I wanted them to walk so far into their own trap that there would be no excuses left. No apologies that could erase what they had planned. I wanted the truth exposed in a way that could never be denied. My hands didn't shake when I opened my airline app. I searched for the next available flight to Seattle. There was one leaving in 4 hours. A red-eye. Expensive. I didn't care. I booked it without hesitation. Then I sat back in my chair and watched the rest of the security footage in silence. Rachel's mother opened my kitchen cabinets, pointing out which dishes she wanted to keep and which ones could be donated. Donated my dishes. The mover carried boxes labeled master bedroom up my stairs. Rachel stood in the center of it all, directing traffic like a conductor, completely confident that I would never fight back, because I never had. I had spent years being agreeable, being helpful, being the kind of mother and mother-in-law who said yes to every request, who funded every emergency, who swallowed every bit of disrespect with a smile, because I thought that was what love looked like. But they had mistaken my kindness for weakness. They had mistaken my silence for surrender. They had mistaken my age for helplessness, and that, my friends, was going to be their biggest mistake. I stood up from the balcony chair, walked back into my hotel room, and began packing my suitcase. The sun was setting behind me, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. But I wasn't watching it anymore. My focus had shifted entirely. I was going home, and when I arrived, they were going to learn something about me they should have known all along. I wasn't too old to make a scene. I was just old enough to make it count. They thought I wouldn't fight back. They would soon learn how wrong they were. As I sat in that hotel room packing my bag, my mind kept circling back to one question. How did I get here? How did I become the kind of woman a daughter-in-law thought she could bulldoze? The answer wasn't simple. It never is when you've spent years ignoring small wounds until they become gaping holes. Rachel didn't start as a villain in my story. She started as a charming young woman who seemed genuinely interested in becoming part of our family. When Evan first introduced her, I was relieved, happy even. My son had struggled with relationships, and here was someone who seemed patient with him. Kind, or so I thought. In the beginning, Rachel was everything you'd want in a future daughter-in-law. She complimented my cooking. She asked questions about my late husband. She sent pictures of their dates and always made sure to include little notes. Evan talks about you constantly, Mary. You raised such a wonderful man. I ate it up. I had been alone for years at that point, and the attention felt good. It felt like I mattered again. Like I wasn't just a widow filling her days with book clubs and gardening. But looking back now, with the clarity that comes from betrayal, I see what I missed. Rachel wasn't building a relationship with me. She was building a file. She was learning what buttons to push, what words made me soften, what requests I couldn't say no to. The first request came 6 months before their wedding. Rachel called me one evening, her voice tight with stress. Mary, I hate to ask this, but we're a little short on the venue deposit. Just $2,000. I know it's a lot, but if we don't pay by Friday, we lose the date. $2,000 was a lot, but it was my son's wedding. I told myself, this is what mothers do. They support their children's milestones. I transferred the money that night. Rachel sent flowers the next day with a card that read, "You're the best mother-in-law anyone could ask for." I kept that card on my fridge for months. They never paid me back, but I didn't ask. Weddings are expensive. I understood. Then came the honeymoon fund. Then the down payment on their car. Then daycare for their first child. Each time Rachel approached me the same way. Sweet, grateful, just a little desperate. And each time I said yes because that's what family does, right? Except family also says thank you. Family also offers to pay you back. Family also helps you when you need it. Rachel's family did none of those things. Her gratitude became shorter with each request. The flowers stopped coming. The thank you notes turned into quick text messages. Got it. Thanks. And eventually, even those stopped. The requests just became expectations. I started noticing a pattern. Every time I saw Rachel, she had a new concern about my life. Not hers. Mine. Mary, are you sure you should be driving at night? Your reflexes aren't what they used to be. Mary, this house is so big for one person. Don't you feel lonely rattling around in here? Mary, have you thought about what happens if you fall and no one's here to help you? At the time, I thought she was being thoughtful, concerned. Now I realized she was planting seeds. She was conditioning me to believe I needed help, that I was fragile, that living alone was dangerous. She was softening the ground so that when the time came, I'd welcome the idea of giving up my independence. Evan played his part too, though I don't think he realized it. Whenever I hesitated on a request, he'd call, "Mom, Rachel's really stressed about this. Could you just help us out this once?" This once. It was never once. But I couldn't say no to my son. Especially not when he made it sound like I was the solution to all their problems. Like my support was the only thing holding their life together. I became their safety net, their backup plan, their emergency fund. And they became comfortable letting me catch them every single time they stumbled. The worst part? I didn't even realize how much I had given until tonight. Sitting in that hotel room, I opened my banking app and started scrolling through old transactions. Transfers to Evan, payments to Rachel, charges I had covered when their cards were declined at family dinners. I grabbed the hotel notepad and started writing. Wedding expenses, $4,000. Car repairs, $3,000. Daycare, 6 months at $800 per month, $4,800. Rent assistance when they were between apartments, $9,000. Credit card payment when Rachel's hours got cut, $5,000. Furniture for their new place, $7,000. Medical bills, $3,000. Groceries during tight months, thousands more, spread across years. The numbers climbed higher and higher until my hand cramped. The total sat at the bottom of the page like an accusation. $54,128. I stared at it. That was more than a year of my retirement income. Gone. Funneled into the lives of 2 adults who never once offered to pay me back. 2 adults who were, at this very moment, measuring my walls and deciding which rooms they'd claim for Rachel's parents. My stomach turned. This wasn't generosity. This wasn't love. This wasn't even support. This was exploitation carefully disguised as need. And I had let it happen. No, I had funded it. I had smiled through every request. I had reassured them that it was fine, that I was happy to help, that family takes care of each other. But the care only went one direction. When my roof leaked last spring, did they offer to help with repairs? No. Evan said they were too busy. When I mentioned feeling isolated after my book club disbanded, did Rachel invite me to spend time with them? No. She suggested I join a senior center. When I asked if they could help me move furniture so I could deep clean, did they show up? No. They sent a text saying they'd try to come by next month. Next month never came. I wasn't family to them. I was a resource, an ATM with a pulse. And the moment I stopped being useful, they planned to take the one thing I had left. My home. I closed the banking app and sat in the silence of that hotel room, feeling something shift inside my chest. Shame turned into anger. Anger turned into clarity. Clarity turned into resolve. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg them to see me as a human being instead of a means to an end. I was going to let them finish what they started. I was going to let them move everything in, settle her parents into my rooms, unpack their lives into my home, and then I was going to show them exactly what happens when you mistake silence for permission. I zipped my suitcase closed, picked up my phone, and checked my flight details. For hours until boarding, I ordered room service, ate methodically, and began organizing every receipt, every bank record, every text message where they had asked for money. I wasn't preparing for a conversation. I was preparing for war. And this time I wasn't going to lose. The airport was nearly empty when I arrived. Late-night flights to Seattle aren't exactly popular, and I was grateful for the quiet. I needed space to think, space to plan, space to organize the storm that was building in my chest into something precise and undeniable. My laptop came out first, then my phone, Then the notepad where I had scribbled the initial financial tally back in the hotel room. $54,128. Even now, seeing it written in my own handwriting, it felt impossible. How does someone give away that much money without realizing it? The answer was simple, and it made my chest tighten with something close to embarrassment. I gave it away in pieces. 2,000 here, 5,000 there. Small enough amounts that I could justify them individually. Tell myself it was just helping out, just being supportive, just doing what mothers do. But when you add all those small sacrifices together over the course of 5 years, they stop being kindness. They become a pattern of control. I opened a new folder on my desktop and named it simply Records. Then I got to work. I started with my bank statements going back 60 months. Every transfer to Evan, every Venmo payment to Rachel, every time I had covered a dinner bill because their cards were mysteriously declined, I copied each transaction into a spreadsheet. Date, amount, purpose. The purpose column was the hardest to fill in because half the time they hadn't even told me what the money was for, just that they needed it urgently. Always urgently. But I remembered enough. The wedding deposit, the car repair that turned out to be a down payment on a newer model, the emergency dental work that I later found out was cosmetic veneers, the overdue electric bill that came right before they bought a 60-inch television. My fingers moved faster as the anger built. Next, I pulled up my text messages. I scrolled back through years of conversations, screenshotting every request. Mom, can you help us out with rent this month? We're a little short. Mary, the kids need new shoes and we don't get paid until Friday. Can you cover? Hey Mom, our credit card got declined at the grocery store. Can you send 200? I saved every single one. Then I went further. I searched my email for receipts. Anything I had purchased for them and never been reimbursed for. Furniture I had bought when they moved into their apartment. Gifts I had given that they had specifically requested. Expensive things they claimed were necessities. A crib, a stroller, a high chair, baby monitors, clothes, toys. Thousands of dollars in items that weren't gifts at all. They were requirements. Things Rachel told me they absolutely needed. And if I didn't buy them, I was being unsupportive. The spreadsheet grew longer and longer. By the time boarding was announced, I had documented every dollar. $54,128. The number sat at the bottom of the screen, cold and factual. I saved the file, backed it up to the cloud, emailed a copy to myself. Then I sat back in my seat and stared at it. This was the cost of being too agreeable, too trusting, too willing to believe that people you love would never take advantage of you. For the first time, I let myself say it out loud, quietly under my breath as passengers filed past me toward the gate. I was exploited, not helped, not needed, exploited. They saw my kindness and turned it into a subscription service. Automatic, expected, endless. And when the money wasn't enough anymore, they came for the house. I boarded the plane feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Certainty. I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't second-guessing myself. I wasn't wondering if maybe I was overreacting or being too sensitive. I knew exactly what had happened, and I knew exactly what I was going to do about it. The flight was 5 hours. I didn't sleep. Instead, I created a second document. This one wasn't about money. It was about evidence. I went through my security camera footage frame by frame, taking screenshots of everything. Rachel measuring the walls. Her father pointing at my furniture, discussing what to remove. Her mother opening my kitchen cabinets, deciding what to keep. The mover carrying boxes labeled for my upstairs bedrooms. Evan standing in the background, hands in his pockets, fully aware of what was happening. Each image was dated and time-stamped by the camera system. Undeniable proof that this wasn't a misunderstanding or a miscommunication. It was planned, deliberate, coordinated. I organized the images into a folder and added them to the financial records. Then I drafted a timeline. A simple, chronological account of how we got here, starting with the first financial request 5 years ago, and ending with tonight's footage of them moving into my home without permission. No emotional language, no accusations, just facts, dates, amounts, actions. By the time the plane began its descent into Seattle, I had built a case so airtight that no amount of crying or apologizing or playing the family card could dismantle it. The shame I had felt earlier was gone. In its place was something sharper, colder: resolve. I looked out the window as the city lights came into view below. Dawn was still an hour away. The sky was that deep blue that comes just before sunrise, and the world below looked quiet, peaceful. But I wasn't peaceful. I was a woman who had just spent 5 hours documenting every way her family had betrayed her trust. And I wasn't finished yet. I checked my phone as the wheels touched down. No messages from Evan. No calls from Rachel. They had no idea I was coming. They thought I was still in Hawaii, blissfully unaware, sipping tropical drinks while they erased me from my own home. I smiled, just barely. Good. Let them think that. Let them settle in. Let them unpack. Let them get comfortable in rooms that didn't belong to them. Let them believe they had one. Because the deeper they walked into the situation, the harder it would be for them to lie their way out of it. I gathered my things as the plane taxied to the gate. My carry-on bag, my laptop, my phone with its folders full of evidence. I didn't text anyone, didn't call ahead, didn't warn them I was back. I wanted them completely off guard. I wanted to see their faces when I walked into that house and shattered the illusion they had built. The illusion that I was too old, too weak, too afraid of conflict to fight back. I stepped off the plane and into the terminal. The air was cool. The airport was quiet. And I was ready. I had spent 5 years being taken advantage of. I had spent 5 hours documenting it. Now it was time to end it. I walked through the empty terminal, my footsteps echoing against the tile floor, and headed toward the exit. Seattle was waiting, and so was my house. But this time I wasn't walking into it as the woman they thought I was. I was walking into it as the woman I should have been all along. The woman who knew her worth. The woman who demanded respect. The woman who refused to be erased. The sky outside was beginning to lighten. Just barely. Dawn was coming. And so was I. I rented a car at the airport and drove through the empty, pre-dawn streets of Seattle. The city was still asleep. Street lights glowed orange against the dark sky. A few delivery trucks rumbled past, but otherwise the roads were mine. I didn't go straight to the house. Instead, I parked 2 blocks away in front of a small park where the trees would hide my car from view. I needed to see what was happening before I walked into it. I needed to understand the full scope of what they had done. I pulled out my phone and opened the security app. 6 cameras, every angle of my property covered. I tapped the live feed and my stomach dropped. The house was fully lit. Every window glowed. At 4:30 in the morning, my home looked like a department store during a holiday sale. I zoomed in on the front entrance. A moving truck sat in my driveway, its back doors open. 2 men in company uniforms were carrying a dresser up my front steps. Behind them, Rachel's father directed traffic, pointing toward the staircase. I switched to the kitchen camera. Rachel's mother stood at my counter, unpacking dishes. Not her dishes. My dishes were already stacked in a cardboard box near the sink, labeled in thick black marker, "Donate." My dishes. The ones my husband and I had picked out together 30 years ago. Plain white porcelain with tiny blue flowers along the rim. Nothing fancy but ours. And she was replacing them. I switched to the upstairs hallway camera. Boxes lined the walls. Clothing racks filled with coats and dresses I didn't recognize. Suitcases stacked 3 high. This wasn't a temporary visit. This wasn't helping me out or combining households. This was a full relocation. Rachel's parents weren't staying for a few weeks while they looked for a place. They were moving in permanently, and I was expected to accept it. I watched as Rachel's mother walked into my bedroom. My bedroom, the one I had slept in alone for 10 years since my husband passed. The one where I kept his reading glasses on the nightstand because I couldn't bring myself to put them away. She stood in the doorway, hands on her hips, surveying the space like a real estate agent evaluating a property. Then she turned and called down the hallway. I couldn't hear her through the camera, but I could read her lips well enough. "This one's perfect for us." My jaw tightened. I switched cameras again. Living room. The movers were hauling in a leather recliner, oversized, brown, completely out of place among my furniture. Rachel's father pointed to the corner where my reading chair sat. The chair my husband had bought me for our anniversary. Soft gray fabric, perfectly worn in. One of the movers lifted it. "Where does this go?" he asked. Rachel's father waved dismissively. "Storage. We'll deal with it later." I watched as they carried my chair out of the room. Just like that, 30 years of memories reduced to an inconvenience. I felt my hands start to shake, so I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. Breathe, Mary. Just breathe. I switched to the garage camera. Evan was there, my son. He stood near the workbench, staring at a stack of boxes. He wasn't moving them. He wasn't helping. He was just standing there looking uncomfortable. But he was there. He knew. He had always known. As I watched, Rachel walked into the frame. She said something to him. He nodded. She handed him a clipboard, and he glanced at it briefly before setting it down on the bench. The camera angle wasn't perfect, but I could see enough. It was a floor plan. A layout of my house with rooms labeled Master Bedroom, Mom and Dad, Guest Room 1, Office for Dad, Guest Room 2, Craft Room for Mom, Downstairs Bedroom Mary. I read that last line 3 times, my vision blurring at the edges. Downstairs Bedroom Mary. Not Mary's room. Not guest room. Just Mary. As if I were the guest in my own home. As if I were being given a space out of charity. I clicked off the app and sat in silence for a long moment, staring through the windshield at nothing. The sun was starting to rise now. Pale gray light filtered through the trees, turning the sky from black to silver. I had known they were disrespectful. I had known they were entitled. But seeing it like this, watching them systematically erase me from my own home, broke something open inside my chest. This wasn't about needing help. This wasn't about family staying close. This was about replacement. They weren't moving in with me. They were moving in instead of me. I opened the app again, forcing myself to keep watching. Back to the living room camera. Rachel's mother was hanging pictures now. Family photos. Her family, not mine. She took down the portrait of my husband and me from our wedding day and leaned it against the wall, face inward. Then she hung a photo of herself and her husband in its place. I felt tears sting my eyes, but I blinked them away. No, not yet. I wasn't going to cry in a parked car while they dismantled my life. I was going to cry later, when this was over, when my home was mine again. Right now, I needed to stay focused. I switched cameras one more time. Upstairs hallway. A stack of boxes sat near the linen closet. I zoomed in on the labels. The first one read, extra blankets and pillows. The second one read, holiday decorations. The third one made my breath catch, Mary's room storage. I stared at those words until they stopped looking like letters and started looking like evidence. They had planned this down to the box labels. They knew exactly what they were doing. And they had done it assuming I would never fight back. Assuming I would come home, see the situation, and quietly accept my new role as the elderly woman living in the back bedroom, grateful for whatever space they allowed me to occupy. I closed the app and set my phone down in the cup holder. My hands were steady now. The shaking had stopped. The tears had dried before they could fall. What remained was something cold and clear and entirely focused. They had made their choice. Now I was going to make mine. I started the car and pulled out of the parking spot, but I didn't drive toward the house. Not yet. First, I had preparations to make. I needed new locks. All of them. Front door, back door, side entrance, garage. I needed documentation. Photos. Printed records. Everything organized and ready to present. I needed a plan that was airtight, foolproof, and impossible to argue against. I drove toward the hardware store. Even though it wouldn't open for another 2 hours, that was fine. I could wait in the parking lot. I could organize my thoughts. I could rehearse what I would say when the moment came, because the moment was coming soon. And when it arrived, I wanted to be ready. Not emotional. Not frantic. Not desperate. Ready the way you are when you've spent 5 hours on a plane documenting every betrayal. The way you are when you've watched your own family erase you in real time. The way you are when you finally understand that kindness without boundaries is just permission to be used. I pulled into the hardware store parking lot and turned off the engine. The sky was lighter now. Morning was here, and so was I. They thought I was still in Hawaii. They thought I wouldn't find out until it was too late. They thought wrong. I leaned back in the seat and watched the sun rise over the parking lot, painting the clouds in shades of pink and gold. It was going to be a beautiful day, and by the end of it, my home would be mine again. The hardware store opened at 6. I was the first customer through the door. The young man behind the counter looked surprised to see anyone so early, but I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I walked straight to the lock aisle and started selecting what I needed. Deadbolts, high security, 4 of them. A complete lock set for the front door, another for the back, a third for the side entrance, and a heavy-duty mechanism for the garage. The man watched me load my cart, clearly curious, but too polite to ask. I didn't explain. At the register, I added one more item. A small toolkit with everything I'd need to install the locks myself if necessary. I'd watched my husband do it enough times over the years. I could manage. Big project? The cashier asked as he rang up my purchases. You could say that, I replied. He handed me the receipt and I left. Next stop, the storage facility. I had reserved a unit online during the flight, and now I needed to finalize the paperwork. The facility was only 10 minutes from my house, which made it perfect for what I had planned. The manager met me at the office, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. You're Mary Cross? She asked, glancing at her computer screen. I am. You reserved a 10 by 10 unit, climate-controlled. Is that still what you need? Yes. She slid the contract across the desk. I signed without reading it. I didn't care about the fine print. I just needed a secure place to store the things that mattered most. Things Rachel's parents couldn't touch. Things that were mine and would stay mine. The manager handed me 2 keys. Unit 42. Down the hallway, 3rd door on the left. You're paid through the end of the year. I thanked her and drove my rental car to the unit. It was empty, clean, perfect. I made a mental list of what I'd move here later today. My husband's belongings from the upstairs closet, photo albums, important documents, anything with sentimental value that I couldn't risk them damaging or discarding while I dealt with the confrontation ahead. Because there would be a confrontation, and I needed to make sure that when it happened, nothing irreplaceable was left in their reach. I locked the unit and headed back to the car. Next on my list, the police station. I know what you're thinking. Asterisk, why not just call the police right now? Why not have them removed immediately? Asterisk, because that wouldn't solve the real problem. If I called the police now, Rachel would spin a story. She'd claim it was a misunderstanding, that she thought I had given permission, that we're family and this was just a miscommunication. And Evan would back her up. They'd apologize. They'd leave. They'd regroup. And in 6 months, they'd try again. Maybe more subtly. Maybe with a different approach. No. I needed them to go so far that there was no explaining it away. No softening it. No claiming it was anything other than what it was. A calculated invasion. I parked outside the police station and walked inside. The officer at the front desk looked up. Can I help you? I'd like to update my home security settings to include automatic police notification for unauthorized entry, I said calmly. He directed me to a community liaison officer who handled that sort of thing. She was a woman in her 40s, professional and efficient. She explained how the system worked. If my security cameras detected forced entry or triggered certain alerts, the system could automatically notify the police department. It's usually used for vacation homes or people who travel frequently, she said. Do you travel often? I do, I lied smoothly. And I've had some concerns about security. She didn't press further. She helped me fill out the paperwork, linked my security system to the department's database, and activated the alerts. You're all set, she said. If the system triggers, we'll send an officer to your address immediately. Thank you. I left the station feeling another piece click into place. Now, if Rachel or her parents tried to re-enter the house after I removed them, the police would be notified automatically. No debates. No second chances. Just consequences. I drove toward my neighborhood but parked a block away again. I wasn't ready to confront them yet. There was still one more thing I needed to do. I opened my security app and watched the live feed. The movers were gone now. The truck had left, but Rachel's parents were still there, walking through the rooms like they owned them. I switched to the dining room camera. Papers were spread across my table. I zoomed in. Moving schedules, furniture layouts, lists of items to donate or discard. And there, right in the center, was a handwritten note. I couldn't read all of it from the camera angle, but I could make out enough. Mary's belongings, downstairs storage. Keep minimal furniture. She won't need much. My hands tightened around the phone. I needed those documents. Every single one of them. I waited until Rachel's parents left the dining room. Then I made my move. I slipped into the house through the side door, the one they had left unlocked because they didn't think anyone would challenge them. The house was quieter now. I could hear Rachel's mother upstairs, moving boxes around. I moved quickly. I gathered every piece of paper from the dining room table. Moving contracts, floor plans, schedules, shopping lists for furniture they planned to buy with my space in mind. I took all of it. Then I noticed something else. A binder, thick, navy blue, sitting on the corner of the table. I opened it. Inside were printed emails between Rachel and her parents discussing the logistics of the move. Dates, times, what to say if I came home early. There was even a script, actual written lines for Rachel to use if I confronted her. We were worried about you living alone. We thought you'd appreciate the company. This is what families do. I stared at those words, feeling something cold settle in my chest. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't desperation. This was premeditated, rehearsed, planned down to the talking points. I closed the binder and took it with me. Then I moved to the kitchen and opened the drawer where I kept important files. My property deed, my will, insurance documents. All of it was still there, untouched. For now, I took those too. I carried everything out to my car and locked it in the trunk. Then I drove to a print shop and made copies of everything. The moving plans, the emails, the binder, the floor layouts with my name relegated to the smallest room. I organized it all into a folder. On the front, I wrote simply, evidence. I added the financial records I had compiled on the plane, the bank statements, the screenshots of their requests for money. $54,000 on one side, a home invasion on the other. Together, they painted a picture so clear that no jury, no mediator, no family counselor could deny what had happened. I had been used, exploited, and now erased. I sat in the parking lot of the print shop and looked at the folder. This was it. This was everything I needed. They thought the house was already theirs. They thought I'd come home and quietly accept my new role. They thought wrong. And the beautiful part? I didn't need to build a trap. They had built it themselves. Every document, every email, every box labeled with my things marked for storage. They had handed me the evidence. All I had to do now was use it. I started the car and drove back toward my neighborhood. This time I wasn't stopping a block away. This time I was going home. And when I walked through that door, everything was going to change. They thought I was weak. They were about to learn the truth. I pulled onto my street just after 9 in the morning. The moving truck was back. It sat in my driveway like a monument to their audacity. Its rear doors open, ramp extended. 2 movers were carrying a massive sectional sofa up my front walkway. Rachel's father stood near the mailbox, gesturing toward the house, directing them where to place it. I parked at the curb and turned off the engine. For a moment I just sat there, watching. Rachel's mother emerged from the front door carrying a potted plant. She set it on the porch railing, adjusting its position like she was staging a home for sale. On my home, my porch, my railing. I took a deep breath, grabbed the evidence folder from the passenger seat, and stepped out of the car. The sound of the car door closing made Rachel's father glance up. He saw me. His expression shifted from casual confidence to confusion in less than a second. "Mary?" he called out, uncertain. I didn't answer. I just started walking toward the house. That's when Rachel appeared in the doorway. She froze. Literally froze. one hand still on the doorframe, her mouth slightly open. "Mary?" she said, her voice thin and high. You weren't supposed to be back until Tuesday. Plans changed," I said evenly. The movers stopped mid-lift. The sofa suspended between them. They looked at each other, then at Rachel, clearly sensing the tension. Rachel's mother stepped forward, her face already arranging itself into a smile. "Mary, sweetheart, what a surprise. We were just getting settled. We wanted it to be a nice surprise for you when you got back." I looked at her directly. "A surprise?" I repeated. "Yes," she continued, her voice taking on that syrupy tone people use when they're trying to manipulate someone. "We know how hard it's been for you, living in this big house all alone. We thought having family around would make you feel safer, more comfortable." "Comfortable?" I said quietly. She nodded eagerly, misreading my calm as acceptance. "Exactly. You've been so generous with us over the years. This is our way of giving back, taking care of you." Behind her, I saw Evan emerge from the garage. He was carrying a rolled-up area rug, sweat on his forehead. When he saw me, the rug slipped from his hands and hit the concrete with a dull thump. "Mom," he said, "what are you doing here?" I turned to face him fully. "What am I doing here?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Evan, this is my home." He opened his mouth, closed it, looked at Rachel for help. She stepped down from the porch, her smile still in place, but her eyes nervous. "Mary, I think there's been a misunderstanding," she said quickly. "We're not taking anything from you. We're helping. My parents needed a place to stay, and your house has so much room, and we thought, it would be good for everyone." "Good for everyone?" I echoed. "Yes," Rachel continued, her words coming faster now. "We were going to explain everything when you got back. We wanted to have it all set up first so you wouldn't have to deal with the stress of moving day. We were doing this for you." The lie sat between us like a third person. I held up the folder. "Is that why you labeled my bedroom for your parents?" I asked calmly. "Is that why you packed my dishes to donate? Is that why you wrote a floor plan that puts me in the smallest room downstairs?" Rachel's smile vanished. Her mother's face went pale. Evan took a step forward. "Mom, let's just go inside and talk about this calmly." "We are calm," I said. "I'm perfectly calm." And that was the thing that seemed to unsettle them most. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't crying. I wasn't shaking or panicking or falling apart the way they clearly expected. I was simply standing on my own lawn, in front of my own house, holding proof of everything they had done. "I saw everything," I continued. "The security cameras recorded all of it. You measuring my walls. You deciding which rooms you'd take. You laughing about how I wouldn't make a scene because I'm too old to fight back." Rachel's face flushed deep red. I didn't mean it like that," she stammered. "How did you mean it?" I asked. She had no answer. Rachel's father cleared his throat, trying to regain some authority. "Mary, I think you're overreacting. We're family. Family helps each other. That's all we're doing here. Family asks permission," I said. "Family respects boundaries. Family doesn't break into someone's home and start moving in while they're out of town." "We didn't break in," Rachel's mother protested. "We have a key for emergencies," I corrected. "Not for moving your entire household into my house without telling me." "We were going to tell you," Rachel insisted, desperation creeping into her voice. "Now? When?" I asked. "After you had already unpacked? After your parents were settled in my bedroom? After you had donated my belongings and replaced them with yours?" The movers, clearly uncomfortable, set the sofa down on the lawn and backed away toward their truck. One of them called out, "Ma'am, do you want us to keep unloading, or?" I looked at Rachel. She looked at me. "No," I said firmly. "You can start putting it all back." Rachel's eyes went wide. "Mary, you can't be serious." "I'm completely serious." "But where will my parents go?" she asked, her voice rising. "They gave up their apartment. They're counting on this. They gave up their apartment without asking me if they could live here. I said. That's not my problem. That's yours. Evan stepped between us, holding up his hands. Mom, please, just calm down for a second. We can figure this out. I am calm, I repeated. And there's nothing to figure out. This is my house. I didn't give anyone permission to move in. You need to leave. Rachel's composure shattered. You're choosing a house over your own family? She shouted. Her voice carried across the lawn, sharp and accusing. And that's when I noticed the movement at the edges of my vision. Neighbors, stepping onto their porches, pausing mid-task in their yards, turning toward the commotion. Mrs. Stevenson from 2 doors down, the young couple across the street, Mr. Peterson, who was always up early, tending his roses. They were all watching now. Rachel noticed, too. Her face went from red to white in an instant. Let's go inside, she hissed. This is private. No, I said clearly. We're staying right here, because I wanted witnesses. I wanted everyone on this street to see what was happening. I wanted it public, undeniable, impossible to rewrite later into some story where I was the unreasonable one. Rachel's mother grabbed her husband's arm. Maybe we should just go, she whispered. But Rachel wasn't done. You're going to embarrass us in front of the whole neighborhood? She demanded. I'm not embarrassing you, I said. You did that yourself when you tried to steal my house. The word hung in the air. Steal. Evan flinched. Mom, that's not fair. We weren't stealing anything. I opened the folder and pulled out the first document. The floor plan with my name relegated to the downstairs bedroom. I held it up so everyone could see. This is fair, I said. I held the floor plan higher, turning it so the neighbors could see. This, I said, my voice steady but loud enough to carry, is a layout my daughter-in-law created while I was in Hawaii. It shows which rooms her parents would take, which rooms would become their office and craft space, and where I would sleep. I pointed to the small notation in the corner. Downstairs bedroom. Mary. More neighbors emerged now. The street was filling with witnesses. Rachel lunged forward, trying to grab the paper from my hands. That's private. I stepped back smoothly, keeping it out of her reach. Private, I repeated. You drew up plans for my house without my knowledge, but now you want privacy? Her face was scarlet now, a mix of rage and humiliation. You're twisting everything, she said, her voice shaking. We were trying to help you. You're making us look like criminals. I'm not making you look like anything, I replied. I'm showing people what you did. Evan moved closer, his hands raised in a placating gesture. Mom, everyone's watching. Can we please just go inside and talk about this like adults? I looked at him directly. Adults ask permission before moving into someone else's home, I said. Adults don't plan an invasion and hope the victim is too polite to fight back. His face crumpled. He opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. I pulled another document from the folder. The email chain between Rachel and her parents, dated 3 weeks ago, discussing logistics. Should we tell Mary beforehand or just do it while she's gone? Rachel's mother had written. Rachel's response. Easier to ask forgiveness than permission. Once we're in, she won't kick us out. I read it aloud, slowly, clearly. The neighbors shifted uncomfortably. A few whispered to each other. Rachel's mother went pale. That was taken out of context. What context? I asked. What context makes it acceptable to invade someone's home? She had no answer. Rachel's father stepped forward, trying to take control of the situation. Mary, you're being unreasonable. We're family. Family doesn't treat each other like this. You're absolutely right, I said. Family doesn't treat each other like this. I pulled out the next document, the financial ledger. 5 years of transactions. Every loan. Every emergency. Every time they had asked for money and never paid it back. $54,128. I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. That's how much I've given to my son and his wife over the past 5 years. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Evan's eyes went wide. Mom, don't what? I asked. Don't tell the truth? Don't show people how you treated me like an ATM while planning to take my house. Rachel tried to interrupt. Those were loans. We were going to pay you back. Were you? I asked, flipping to a page in the ledger. Because I have text messages where I asked about repayment, and you told me, family doesn't keep score. She went silent. Family doesn't keep score. That's what you said over and over. Every time I mentioned the money, family doesn't keep score. I looked up from the folder, meeting her eyes. But family also doesn't exploit each other, I said. Family doesn't manipulate. Family doesn't measure your walls and plan which rooms to claim while you're on vacation. The neighbors were fully engaged now. I could see some of them nodding. Others looked horrified. Rachel spun toward them, her voice desperate. She's making this sound worse than it is. We were worried about her. She's getting older. She shouldn't be living alone in such a big house. We thought having us here would be good for her. I pulled out the final document. The handwritten note from Rachel's planning binder. Mary's belongings. Downstairs storage. Keep minimal furniture. She won't need much. I read it aloud. Rachel's mother covered her face with her hands. Rachel's father looked like he wanted the earth to swallow him whole. Evan stared at the ground, his shoulders sagging. Does that sound like concern? I asked the crowd. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just honestly. Nobody answered. They didn't need to. The silence was answer enough. One of the movers cleared his throat awkwardly. Ma'am, he said, addressing me. Do you want us to reload the truck? I looked at him, then at Rachel, then at the furniture scattered across my lawn. Yes, I said firmly. Everything that doesn't belong to me goes back on that truck. Rachel's composure finally shattered completely. You can't do this, she said, her voice breaking. My parents have nowhere to go. They gave up their apartment for this. That was your decision, I replied. Not mine. You're really going to throw us out in front of everyone? I'm not throwing you out, I corrected. You were never in. You broke in. There's a difference. The movers started picking up the sofa again, this time heading back toward the truck. Rachel's father grabbed one of them by the arm. Wait. Just wait a second. The movers looked uncomfortable. Sir, the homeowner has asked us to reload. We have to follow her instructions. She's not thinking clearly, Rachel's father insisted. She's confused. I stepped forward. I'm not confused, I said, my voice cutting through the chaos. I'm 72 years old. I've been a widow for 10 years. I've managed this house, this property, and my finances alone for a decade. I am not confused. I turned to address the neighbors directly now, raising my voice so everyone could hear clearly. This house has been mine for 32 years. I paid for every brick, every tax bill, every repair. I cared for it alone after my husband passed. And while I was on vacation, my own family tried to take it from me. The street had gone completely quiet. Even the morning birds seemed to have stopped singing. They thought I wouldn't fight back, I continued. They thought my age made me weak. They thought I'd come home, see what they'd done, and quietly accept it because I hate conflict. I paused, looking at each of them in turn. Rachel, her parents, Evan. They were wrong. Rachel was crying now, tears streaming down her face, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of humiliation. She had been exposed in front of the entire neighborhood, and there was no talking her way out of it. Her mother tried one last time. Mary, please. We made a mistake. We're sorry, but your family. Doesn't that mean anything? I met her eyes. Family means respect, I said quietly. And you've shown me none. The movers continued loading, box after box, furniture piece after furniture piece. Everything that had been brought into my house over the past 24 hours was being removed, and everyone was watching. Rachel turned to Evan, her voice desperate. Do something. She's your mother. Make her stop. Evan looked at me. For a moment I thought he might actually try, but then he saw my face, saw the folder in my hands, saw the neighbors watching, saw the truth of what they'd done reflected in every witness standing on the street. and he said nothing. He just stood there, defeated, while his wife's scheme collapsed around them. The movers worked efficiently, clearing my lawn, and I stood in the center of it all, holding my evidence, refusing to back down. They had tried to erase me. Instead, they had exposed themselves. Rachel wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, taking a shaky breath. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. The desperation was still there, but now it was wrapped in something else. A practice tone, the kind someone uses when they're trying to rewrite history in real time. "Mary, I think you're misunderstanding our intentions," she said, composing herself. "Everything we did for you. We were helping you." I didn't respond. I just waited. She took my silence as permission to continue. "You've been so lonely since Dad passed," she said, her voice softening into something that might have sounded caring if I didn't know better. "You talk about it all the time. How quiet the house is. How empty it feels. We thought having my parents here would give you companionship, people to talk to, family around you." She looked at the neighbors, playing to her audience. "Now that's all we wanted," she continued. "To make sure Mary wasn't alone anymore. To fill this big house with life and love again." A few of the neighbors shifted, their expressions uncertain. It was a good performance. I had to admit, if I hadn't spent the last 12 hours documenting everything, I might have even doubted myself for a moment. But I had the receipts. Literally. I opened the folder again and pulled out a printed screenshot from my security camera. It showed Rachel standing in my living room, pointing at my furniture while talking to the mover. I read the timestamp aloud, Tuesday, 4:30 in the afternoon. 2 days ago. Then I read the caption I had added beneath the image, a direct quote from the audio recording. "Mary won't know until it's too late. By the time she gets back, we'll be moved in and she'll have no choice but to accept it." Rachel's face went white. The neighbors' uncertain expressions hardened. "That doesn't sound like helping me," I said quietly. "That sounds like trapping me." Rachel opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her mother jumped in, trying to salvage the story. Rachel was just stressed. She didn't mean it the way it sounded. "Really?" I asked. "Because I have more." I pulled out another screenshot. This one showed Rachel's mother in my kitchen going through my cabinets. "These dishes are so outdated," the caption read. Another direct quote. "We'll donate them and get something modern." Rachel's mother flushed. "I was just trying to help you update things." "Without asking me," I said. "Well, we didn't want to bother you while you were on vacation." "How considerate," I replied, my tone flat. I pulled out the third screenshot. Rachel's father measuring my bedroom wall. "This room is perfect for us," he had said to his wife. "Mary can take the small room downstairs. She doesn't need much space at her age." The neighbors gasped. Rachel's father stammered. That's not. We weren't trying to take your room, Mary. We were just looking at options." "Options," I repeated. "Options for which rooms you'd claim in my house. Without my permission." He had no response. Rachel tried again, her voice growing shrill. "We were going to fix the place up for you. Do repairs. Paint. Make it nice. It was going to be our contribution. Our way of paying you back for all your help over the years." I pulled out yet another document. The contractor estimate. I had found it in the binder, tucked between the moving schedules. "This is an estimate you requested," I said, scanning the page. "For knocking down the wall between the kitchen and dining room, for converting the garage into a mother-in-law suite, for adding a second bathroom upstairs." I looked up at her. "These aren't repairs, Rachel. This is a renovation. A renovation that would have cost $40,000. Her eyes widened. "And according to this estimate," I continued, "the payment method listed is owner financing." That's me. "You were planning to renovate my house and make me pay for it." The neighbors' whispers grew louder. Rachel's story was crumbling with every piece of evidence I presented. "That was just a preliminary estimate," she protested weakly. "We weren't actually going to do it." "Then why did you request it?" I asked. "Why did you meet with a contractor? Why did you discuss financing options?" She had no answer. Her father tried to step in, his voice taking on a harder edge now. Mary, you're cherry-picking information and making us look bad. You're taking everything out of context. I pulled out the written moving plan, the one that listed exactly which parent would get which room. I read it aloud, slowly and clearly. Master bedroom, east side, mom and dad. Second bedroom, west side, dad's office. Third bedroom, north side, mom's craft room. Downstairs guest room, Mary. Garage conversion, rental income opportunity. I paused on that last line. Rental income, I said. You were planning to convert my garage into an apartment and rent it out. Rachel's parents exchanged panicked glances. That detail had clearly been something Rachel hadn't shared with them. Rachel? Her mother asked, her voice tight. What is she talking about? Rachel fumbled for words. That was just an idea. Just something I thought might help generate income for the household. My household. I corrected. Income from my property that you planned to collect. Her mother's face changed. The realization was dawning. Rachel, she said slowly, did you actually ask Mary if we could move in? Rachel's silence was deafening. Rachel, her father pressed, did you tell her we were coming? I was going to, Rachel said quickly. I just wanted to get everything set up first so she could see how good it would be, so she wouldn't worry about the details. Her mother took a step back, staring at her daughter like she was seeing her for the first time. You told us Mary invited us, she said, her voice shaking. You said she wanted us here. You said she was lonely and asked for our help. She is lonely, Rachel insisted. That's not for you to decide, her father said. And it's certainly not for you to fix by moving us into her house without permission. He rolled up the window. The car pulled away from the curb, leaving Rachel standing alone on the lawn. She turned back toward Evan, her eyes wild. This is your mother. Talk to her. Make her understand. But Evan wasn't looking at her. He was looking at me. The movers finished securing the truck and walked over to me. Everything's loaded, ma'am, one of them said. Do you need us to take it somewhere? Or, Rachel jumped in. Take it to 4782 Maple Street. That's our address. I looked at the mover. Send the bill to that address as well. I'm not paying for any of this. Rachel's mouth fell open. You're seriously making us pay for the moving costs? You hired them. I said you pay them. The movers nodded and headed to their truck. Within minutes, they were gone. The street was emptying now. Neighbors were heading back inside. The show was over. A few lingered on their porches, talking quietly among themselves, no doubt dissecting everything they'd witnessed. Rachel stood in the center of my lawn, looking around like she couldn't quite believe what had happened. This isn't over, she said, her voice shaking. We'll figure this out. We'll find a way to make you see reason. Rachel, I said quietly, go home. She stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked to her car without another word. The engine started. The tires crunched against the asphalt. And then she was gone too. Only Evan remained. He stood near the mailbox, still holding the no trespass order, looking lost. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he walked toward me slowly, like he was approaching something fragile that might shatter if he moved too quickly. Mom, he said softly, I know you're angry. I know we messed up, but please don't do this. Don't shut me out. I looked at my son, the boy I had raised alone after his father died, the child I had sacrificed for, the man I had supported even when it drained me dry, and I felt nothing but exhaustion. I'm not shutting you out, Evan, I said. I'm choosing myself. What does that even mean? It means I won't be erased in my own home, I said. It means I won't be treated like an obstacle to your plans. It means I deserve respect. And if you can't give me that, then you don't get access to my life. His face twisted. You're my mother. You're supposed to forgive me. That's what mothers do. Mothers also teach their children accountability, I said. And right now, you need to learn that your actions have consequences. So what? You're just going to cut me off? Pretend I don't exist. I'm not cutting you off, I said. I'm putting up boundaries. Boundaries I should have put up years ago. He shook his head, frustration bleeding into his voice. You don't understand what you're doing. Rachel's family is furious. They're going to blame me for this. Her parents have nowhere to go. Rachel's going to be impossible to live with. You're ruining my life. I'm not ruining your life, I said calmly. I'm refusing to let you ruin mine. He stared at me, and I saw something shift in his expression. The last trace of hope faded. In its place came something harder, colder. Fine, he said, his voice tight. If that's how you want it, fine. But don't come crying to us when you're lonely and realize you need family. Don't expect us to drop everything and come running when you fall or get sick or can't take care of yourself anymore. It was meant to hurt. It was meant to scare me. It was meant to make me reconsider. But all it did was prove I had made the right decision. I won't, I said simply. He flinched like he'd expected a different response. You're really going to choose a house over your own son? I'm choosing myself over people who don't respect me, I said. There's a difference. He stood there for another moment, waiting for me to cave, waiting for me to soften, waiting for me to be the mother who always said yes, who always gave in, who always put everyone else first. But that mother was gone, and in her place stood someone he didn't recognize, someone who knew her worth, someone who demanded respect, someone who refused to be manipulated. He turned and walked to his car without another word. I watched him drive away, and then I was alone. The street was quiet again. The neighbors had gone inside. The morning sun had climbed higher in the sky, warming the air. I stood on my lawn for a moment, surrounded by the remnants of what had almost been taken from me. Tire marks in the grass from the moving truck. Footprints in the flower beds. A few scattered packing materials the movers had missed. Evidence of the invasion, but also evidence that I had stopped it. I walked up the front steps, pulled out my new keys, and unlocked the door. The house was quiet when I stepped inside. Not empty. Quiet. There's a difference. Empty feels hollow, lonely, sad. Quiet feels peaceful, safe, mine. I closed the door behind me and turned the deadbolt. The click echoed through the hallway. Final. Definitive. Protective. I walked through the rooms slowly, taking inventory. The kitchen, where my dishes were still packed in boxes, but at least they were still here. The living room, where my furniture remained, no longer threatened by replacement. The staircase leading to bedrooms that belonged to me and no one else. I walked upstairs and stood in the doorway of my bedroom. The room Rachel's parents had claimed. The room where I had slept beside my husband for 20 years before he passed. The room where I had cried myself to sleep after his funeral. The room where I had slowly learned to live alone. And they had tried to take it. I sat on the edge of the bed and let out a long, slow breath. For the first time in years, the air in my house felt like it belonged to me. No manipulation, no guilt, no demands disguised as concern. Just silence. And in that silence, I found something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Freedom. I spent the rest of that day putting my house back in order. It sounds simple when I say it like that, but the work was more than physical. It was emotional. Every room I entered held evidence of the violation. Every drawer I opened reminded me of what they had planned. But I moved through it methodically, refusing to let the anger consume me. I started in the kitchen. The boxes Rachel's mother had packed sat near the sink. My dishes wrapped in newspaper and labeled for donation. I unpacked every single one. The white porcelain plates with blue flowers. The coffee mugs my husband had collected from every place we'd ever traveled. The serving bowl we'd used for 30 years of family dinners. I washed each piece carefully, even though they weren't dirty, and put them back in their rightful places. The cabinets looked like mine again. Next, I tackled the living room. The furniture was still arranged properly since they hadn't had time to rearrange everything. But there were traces of them everywhere. Marks on the floor where the movers had set down the sectional sofa. Indentations in the carpet from furniture that had been moved and then removed. I vacuumed. I dusted. I opened the windows and let fresh air chase away the feeling of intrusion. On the mantel, I found that Rachel's mother had moved the framed photo of my husband and me. It was face down, tucked behind a decorative vase, like something to be hidden. I picked it up and set it back where it belonged, center stage where it had always been. I moved upstairs next. The hallway was still cluttered with their boxes, the ones they hadn't had time to unpack before I arrived. I dragged each one to the garage, stacking them near the door for when they eventually came to collect their belongings. If they came to collect them, part of me suspected they'd simply abandon everything, too embarrassed to face me again. That was fine. I'd donate it all eventually. In my bedroom, I stood for a moment, just looking around. This was the space they had claimed for Rachel's parents. The room where I had slept beside my husband for 20 years before he passed. The room where I had cried myself to sleep after his funeral. The room where I had slowly learned to live alone. And they had tried to take it. I opened the closet and found some of Rachel's mother's clothing already hanging there. Dresses, blouses, shoes lined up on the floor. I pulled everything out and added it to the boxes in the garage. Then I reorganized my own clothes, spreading them out, so they filled the space properly instead of being crammed into one corner to make room for someone else. The closet looked right again. I moved to the nightstand and picked up my husband's reading glasses. They were exactly where I had left them 10 years ago, folded carefully, waiting. For a long time, people told me I should put them away, that keeping them out was unhealthy, that I needed to move on. But those glasses weren't about being stuck in the past. They were about remembering that I had been loved, that I had built something beautiful with someone who respected me, that I knew what a real partnership looked like. And they reminded me that I would never accept less than that again. I set the glasses back down gently and sat on the edge of the bed. The house was quiet around me. Not lonely, just quiet. I thought about how I had gotten here. How I had let things deteriorate to the point where my own son thought he could manipulate me. Where my daughter-in-law believed she could invade my home and I'd simply accept it. The truth settled over me like a weight. I had mistaken weakness for kindness. For years, I had said yes to every request because I thought that's what good mothers did. Good mothers sacrificed. Good mothers gave endlessly. Good mothers never set boundaries, because boundaries meant you didn't love your family enough. But all that generosity without limits had done was teach them that I had no limits. It had taught them that they could take and take and take, and I would never stop them. It had taught them that my needs didn't matter, that my home didn't matter, that I didn't matter. And the worst part was that I had taught them this. Not intentionally, but through every yes when I should have said no. Through every boundary I didn't enforce. Through every time I swallowed my discomfort because I didn't want to cause conflict. I had opened the door to my own exploitation, and they had walked right through it. But that stopped now. I stood up and walked to my desk in the corner of the room. I pulled out my will, my power of attorney documents, my advance directives. Everything that detailed what would happen to my estate when I passed. Evan was listed as executor. Rachel was listed as secondary beneficiary. I took a pen and began making notes in the margins. Changes I would make when I met with my attorney next week. Changes that would reflect my new reality. I wasn't cutting Evan out entirely. He was still my son. But I was adding protections, stipulations, safeguards that would prevent anyone from using my death as an opportunity to claim what I had built. My house would go into a trust. My finances would be managed by a professional. My belongings would be distributed according to my wishes, not theirs. I was taking control of my future, even the parts one wouldn't be alive to see. When I finished, I filed the documents away and turned my attention to something I had neglected for far too long. My social life. For years, I had centered my entire world around being useful to Evan and Rachel, around being available whenever they needed something, around proving that I was a good mother by constantly giving. But in doing that, I had let other relationships fade. Friends from my book club, neighbors I used to have coffee with, women I had volunteered alongside at the community center. I had pushed them all to the background because family came first. But family had taken everything and given nothing back. It was time to rebuild. I opened my laptop and sent an email to Margaret, a woman I had been close with years ago before life got busy. before Evan's constant needs consumed all my time and energy. "Hi, Margaret," I typed. "It's been too long. I'd love to catch up over coffee if you're available. Let me know when works for you." I sent similar messages to 3 other women. Then I looked up local volunteer opportunities, book clubs, walking groups, anything that would connect me to people who saw me as more than a resource. By the time the sun started to set, I had plans for the coming weeks. Coffee with Margaret on Thursday, a new book club meeting on Saturday, a volunteer orientation at the library the following Tuesday. I was building a life that didn't revolve around being needed, a life that revolved around being valued. There's a difference. Being needed means people only show up when they want something. Being valued means people show up because they enjoy your company. I had spent too many years being needed. It was time to be valued. I walked downstairs and made myself dinner. Something simple. Pasta with vegetables and garlic bread. I ate at the dining room table. Not in front of the television. Not standing at the counter. I set a proper place setting. I poured myself a glass of wine. I took my time, because this was my house, my table, my life, and I was done apologizing for taking up space in it. After dinner, I washed the dishes and stood at the kitchen window looking out at the yard. The grass needed mowing. The garden needed weeding. There were projects to do, repairs to make, life to be lived. But for the first time in years, I felt excited about it. Not burdened. Excited. This house wasn't a responsibility I had to manage alone. It was a gift I got to enjoy, and I was going to enjoy every single moment of it. 3 weeks passed. The kind of quiet, unremarkable weeks that used to feel empty, but now felt like peace. I settled into a rhythm I hadn't experienced in years. Morning coffee on the back porch. Afternoons spent reading or working in the garden. Evenings with friends I had reconnected with or new people I was meeting through the book club and volunteer work. My house became mine again in ways that went beyond ownership. It became a sanctuary. Every morning I woke up knowing that no one would show up unannounced with demands disguised as emergencies. No one would guilt me into opening my wallet or my home. No one would treat my generosity like an entitlement. The silence was glorious. Margaret came over for coffee that first Thursday, and we talked for 3 hours. She told me about her life, her grandchildren, her recent trip to the coast. And then she asked about me. Not about Evan. Not about whether I was lonely. She asked about me, what I was reading, what I was planning for the summer, what made me happy. It was such a simple thing being asked about my own life, but it felt revolutionary. By the second week, I had joined the walking group that met at the park every Tuesday and Saturday morning. 7 women all around my age, all with stories of their own. We walked 3 miles, talked about everything and nothing, and supported each other without keeping score. One of them, Patricia, mentioned she was looking for help organizing a fundraiser for the local literacy program. I volunteered immediately, not because I felt obligated, but because I wanted to. There's a difference. I heard updates about Rachel and her family through the neighborhood grapevine. Mrs. Stevenson mentioned she had seen Rachel's parents at a hotel near the highway. They had stayed there for a week before finding a small apartment across town. It wasn't much from what I heard. 1 bedroom, far from their daughter, expensive for what it offered. But it was theirs, and it wasn't mine. I felt no satisfaction in their struggle, but I felt no guilt either. They had made choices based on lies Rachel told them. Those choices had consequences, and those consequences were not my responsibility to fix. Evan tried contacting me multiple times. The first message came 2 days after the confrontation. "Mom, can we please talk? I know you're angry, but we need to figure this out." I didn't respond. The second message came 4 days later. "Mom, Rachel's really upset. Her parents are blaming both of us. Can you please just call me?" I didn't respond. The third message came a week after that. "I don't understand why you're doing this. We're family. Family doesn't just shut each other out." That one almost made me laugh. Family doesn't shut each other out, but family can plan to take over your house without permission? The logic was staggering. I didn't respond to that one either. Then, 2 weeks in, a different kind of message arrived. Mom, I've been thinking about everything that happened. I know we messed up. I know we hurt you. Can we please meet somewhere and talk? I want to understand. I read it 3 times. There was something different in the tone, something that felt less like manipulation and more like actual reflection. But I still didn't respond. Not because I didn't care, but because words were cheap. Evan had spent years saying the right things while doing the wrong things. Apologies meant nothing if the behavior didn't change. If he wanted a relationship with me, he needed to prove he understood what respect looked like, not through text messages but through action, through time, through showing me that he valued me as a person, not as a resource. And until that happened, I was content to maintain my distance. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger had burned itself out in those first few days, leaving behind something clearer and calmer. I was simply done. Done being used. Done being manipulated. Done paying for love that should have been freely given. One evening, I sat on my back porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The garden was blooming. The house was clean. The locks were secure. And I was alone. But I wasn't lonely. There's a difference between being alone and being lonely. And I had finally learned it. Lonely is when you're surrounded by people who don't see you. Alone is when you're at peace with yourself. I had spent years being lonely in the presence of family. Now I was alone and more at peace than I had been in decades. I thought about everything that had happened, everything that had led to that moment on my lawn when I finally stood up for myself. For so long, I had believed that being a good mother meant endless sacrifice, that love meant never saying no, that family meant tolerating disrespect because blood mattered more than boundaries. But I had learned something crucial. Family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by respect. And the people who shared my DNA had shown me none. They had seen my kindness and mistaken it for weakness. They had seen my generosity and turned it into expectation. They had seen my age and assumed it made me powerless. They were wrong about all of it. Age hadn't made me weak. It had given me clarity. Clarity about what I deserved. Clarity about what I would no longer tolerate. Clarity about the difference between being loved and being used. And that clarity had given me strength. The strength to say no. The strength to protect my boundaries. The strength to choose myself. I wasn't the same woman who had sat on that balcony in Hawaii watching her home being invaded. That woman would have come home and quietly accepted the situation because she feared conflict more than she valued herself. This woman knew better. This woman knew her worth. This woman protected what was hers. I finished my coffee and stood up from the porch chair. The sun had fully set now. The sky was dark. The stars were beginning to appear. I walked back inside my house and locked the door behind me. The click of the lock was satisfying, final, safe. I walked through the quiet rooms, turning off lights as I went. This was my home. These were my choices. This was my life. And it was mine again. Completely, totally, irrevocably mine. They thought age made me weak, but it gave me clarity. And clarity gave me strength. My home is mine again, and so am I. Have you ever had to draw a line in the sand with family, even when it felt impossible? Or maybe you've been on the other side, realizing you took someone's kindness for granted. I'd really love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Thank you for listening. Take care.